If you're preparing for the AZ-104 Azure Administrator certification, this video can save you weeks of study time. In the next few minutes, you will test yourself with 60 real-style AZ-104 questions covering networking, virtual machines, storage, identity, monitoring, and security. This is not just theory. These are the exact types of questions Azure administrators face in real jobs and certification exams. Pause the video after every question, choose your answer, and track your score carefully. If you score above 50, you are probably ready to schedule the exam. If you score below that, stay till the end, because the explanations will show you exactly what to improve. Let's begin question number 1. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure virtual machine named VM01. VM01 runs an application that does not support multiple active instances. At the end of each month, CPU usage for VM01 peaks when the application runs. You need to create a scheduled runbook to increase the processor performance of VM01 at the end of each month. What tasks should you include in the runbook? Options. A. Add the Azure Performance Diagnostics agent to VM01. B. Modify the VM size property of VM01. C. Add VM01 to a scale set. D. Increase the vCPU quota for the subscription. E. Add a desired state configuration DSC extension to VM01. This question is asking how to handle predictable CPU spikes for a single VM when you cannot add extra instances. The idea is to change the power of the same VM at a scheduled time using automation. Correct answer, B. Modify the VM size property of VM01. Resizing VM01 to a larger VM size SKU increases the number of vCPUs and often memory, so the VM can handle the monthly CPU spike more easily. A scheduled runbook can stop the VM, change its size, and start it again just before the end of month peak, then optionally resize it back later to save money. Why the other options are wrong. Option A. The diagnostics agent only helps with monitoring and troubleshooting. It does not improve CPU performance. Option C. A scale set adds multiple instances, but the application does not support multiple active instances, so this breaks the requirement. Option D. Increasing the subscription vCPU quota allows more vCPUs overall, but does nothing directly for VM01 size. Option E. DSC is for configuration consistency, software settings, not for changing VM size or CPU power. Quick memory tip. Single VM needs more power? Resize the VM, don't add instances. Question 2. Your company needs to deploy an application to a set of 3 virtual machines. You have to ensure that at any point in time, 2 virtual machines are always available in the event of a data center failure. You decide to deploy the virtual machines as part of a single availability zone. Would this fulfill the requirement? Options. A. Yes. B. No. This question checks if you know that a single availability zone is still just one failure domain. It is testing whether that is enough to survive a data center level failure. Correct answer, B. No, all 3 VMs in a single availability zone share the same physical fault domain. If that zone or data center fails, all 3 VMs can go down together, so you cannot guarantee that 2 remain available. To meet the requirement, you must deploy VMs across multiple zones or regions, not just one. Why the other options are wrong. Option A assumes that having more VMs in one zone is enough for data center failure protection, which is not true because a single zonal outage takes them all down. Quick memory tip. Data center failure tolerance needs multiple zones, not more VMs in one zone. Question 3. You have an Azure subscription that contains 10 virtual networks. The virtual networks are hosted in separate resource groups. Another administrator plans to create several network security groups, NSGs, in the subscription. You need to ensure that when an NSG is created, it automatically blocks TCP port 8080 between the virtual networks. Solution. You create a resource lock, and then you assign the lock to the subscription. Does this meet the goal? Options. A. Yes. B. No. This question is checking if you understand that a resource lock is only for protecting resources from change, not for enforcing security rules like specific NSG settings. Correct answer? No. Resource locks, read only or cannot delete, only stop deletion or modification of resources. They do not add or enforce NSG rules, so they cannot automatically block TCP port 8080 on all NSGs. Why the other options are wrong. Option A treats locks as if they could configure NSG rules, which they cannot. They only restrict management actions, not traffic behavior. Quick memory tip: locks protect resources. Policy controls what gets configured. Question 4. Your company currently has a virtual network in Azure. The virtual network has a default subnet that contains two virtual machines named Demo VM and Demo VM1. There is a requirement to inspect all network traffic between the virtual machines for a duration of 3 hours. You propose a solution to create a metric chart for network in and network out. Does this solution fulfill the requirement? Options: A, yes; B, no. Here the question is contrasting simple metrics, traffic volume, with full traffic inspection, seeing packets and flows in detail. It wants you to see that metrics alone are not enough for inspection. Correct answer: B. Network in and network out metrics show how much traffic is going in and out, bytes packets over time, but they do not show packet contents, headers, or specific connections. For traffic inspection, you need packet capture or a network virtual appliance that can look inside flows. Why the other options are wrong. Option A assumes that high-level metrics are equivalent to traffic inspection, which they are not. They only show volume, not details. Quick memory tip: metrics equals volume, inspection equals packet capture, NVA. Question 5. You have an Azure subscription that contains 10 virtual networks. The virtual networks are hosted in separate resource groups. Another administrator plans to create several network security groups, NSGs, in the subscription. You need to ensure that when an NSG is created, it automatically blocks TCP port 8080 between the virtual networks. Solution: you configure a custom policy definition, and then you assign the policy to the subscription. Does this meet the goal? Options: A, yes; B, no. This question is about using Azure policy to make sure every new NSG follows a standard security rule, in this case, blocking TCP 8080. Correct answer: yes. A custom Azure policy can require NSGs to include a rule that denies TCP port 8080 and can deny or modify NSGs that don't comply. When the policy is assigned at the subscription level, it automatically applies to all NSGs created in any resource group within that subscription. Why the other options are wrong. Option B ignores that Azure policy is specifically designed for enforcing and auditing configuration standards like NSG rules. Quick memory tip: need the same NSG rule everywhere? Use Azure policy. Question 6. You plan to use Azure Network Watcher to perform the following tasks. Task 1. Identify a security rule that prevents a network packet from reaching an Azure virtual machine. Task 2. Validate outbound connectivity from an Azure virtual machine to an external host. Which feature should you use for Task 2? Options: A, connection troubleshoot; B, next hop; C, NSG flow logs; D, traffic analytics. This question is asking which tool can actively test a connection from a VM to another endpoint right now. It's about choosing the correct Network Watcher feature for a point-in-time connectivity test. Correct answer: A, connection troubleshoot. Connection troubleshoot lets you test a connection from a VM to another VM, IP, FQDN, or URL, and tells you if the destination is reachable and what the latency is at that moment. That matches the need to validate outbound connectivity from the VM to an external host. Why the other options are wrong. Option B, next hop only shows which route next hop will be used. It doesn't test if the connection actually succeeds. Option C, NSG flow logs record traffic flows for later analysis. They don't initiate a test. Option D, traffic analytics shows aggregated patterns. It's not an on-demand connectivity test. Quick memory tip: one-time connection test, use connection troubleshoot. Question 7. You download an Azure Resource Manager template based on an existing virtual machine. The template will be used to deploy 100 virtual machines. You need to modify the template to reference an administrative password. You must prevent the password from being stored in plain text. What should you create to store the password? Options: A, an Azure Key Vault and an access policy. B, an Azure Storage account and an access policy. C, a Recovery Services Vault and a backup policy. D, Microsoft Entra ID protection and an Azure policy. This question is about how to pass a secure admin password into an ARM template without exposing it in plain text. It's testing your knowledge of the right Azure service for secrets. Correct answer: A, an Azure Key Vault and an access policy. Azure Key Vault is designed to securely store secrets, keys, and certificates, including admin passwords. The ARM template can reference the secret by name, and an access policy or RBAC on the vault allows the deployment to read it without exposing the value directly in the template files. Why the other options are wrong? Option B, a storage account is for data, blobs, files, queues, tables, not a secure secret store. Option C, a recovery services vault is used for backups, not for storing deployment passwords. Option D, Entra ID protection is for detecting risky sign-ins and users, not for holding secrets for ARM deployments. Quick memory tip: ARM template plus secret password? Store it in Key Vault, not in the template. Question 8. You have an Azure subscription that contains a web app named WebApp1. You need to add a custom domain named http://www.preparationlabs.com to WebApp1. What should you do first? Options: A, create a DNS record. B, add a connection string. C, upload a certificate. D, stop WebApp1. This question is about the first step required to attach a custom domain to an app service web app. It wants you to remember that domain ownership must be verified via DNS before binding. Correct answer: A, create a DNS record. To use a custom domain with WebApp1, you must first prove that you own the domain by creating the required DNS record, TXT, CNAME, or A, at your domain provider. Only after this DNS step can you add and bind the custom domain to the web app in Azure. Why the other options are wrong? Option B, connection strings configure app settings, e.g., DB connection, not domains. Option C, a certificate is used later for HTTPS on that custom domain, not as the first step for adding the domain. Option D, stopping the app is not necessary to configure a custom domain. Quick memory tip: custom domain for app service. DNS first, then bind in the app, then certificate for HTTPS. Question 9. You have a deployment template named Template1 that is used to deploy 10 Azure web apps. You need to identify what to deploy before you deploy Template1. The solution must minimize Azure costs. What should you identify? Options: A, 5 Azure application gateways. B, 1 app service plan. C, 10 app service plans. D, 1 Azure Traffic Manager. E, 1 Azure Application Gateway. This question is testing whether you know that multiple web apps can share an app service plan and that sharing is cheaper than creating many plans. Correct answer: B, 1 app service plan. An app service plan defines the compute resources for web apps, and multiple web apps can run on a single plan if they have similar region and performance requirements. Using one plan for 10 apps minimizes cost because you're sharing the same underlying compute. Why the other options are wrong? Option A-E, application gateways are layer 7 load balancers, not prerequisites for deploying web apps. Option C, 10 separate app service plans would be much more expensive, as each plan has its own cost. Option D, Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS-based traffic distributor, not required before deploying apps. Quick memory tip: many web apps plus cost saving, 1 app service plan, many apps. Question 10. Your company has an account and subscription in Azure. They have the requirement of creating multiple Linux servers for their test environment. Some of these servers need to have web servers such as Nginx pre-installed. The installation needs to be carried out in an automated fashion. Which of the following file would you need to create for the automated deployment? Options: A, template.yaml. B, deployment.json. C, cloud-init.txt. D, deploy.xml. This question is asking how to automatically configure Linux VMs at first boot, so software like Nginx is installed without manual steps. The The key concept is Cloud-Init. Cloud-Init is a widely used tool on Linux for running scripts and configuration at first boot, such as installing packages Nginx, creating users, and setting up config files. Providing a cloudinit.txt file when creating the VM lets Azure pass the instructions into the VM so it configures itself automatically. Why the other options are wrong? Option ABD. These names suggest generic template or config formats, but Azure's Linux boot time customization relies specifically on Cloud-Init, not just any YAML JSON XML file. Quick memory tip. Linux VM plus auto install packages at first boot? Use a Cloud-Init script. If these questions are helping, hit like. So YouTube recommends this to more Azure learners. Question 11. You have an Azure subscription that contains a policy-based virtual network gateway named GW1 and a virtual network named VNet1. You need to ensure that you can configure a point-to-site connection from an on-premises computer to VNet1. Which two actions should you perform? Options: A. Delete GW1. B. Add a service endpoint to VNet1. C. Reset GW1. D. Create a root-based virtual network gateway. E. Add a connection to GW1. F. Add a public IP address space to VNet1. This question is asking which changes are needed so VNet1 can support a point-to-site VPN. It's testing if you know that P2S requires a route-based gateway, not a policy-based one. Correct answer: A. Delete GW1. D. Create a route-based virtual network gateway. Point-to-site P2S VPNs require a route-based VPN gateway. Since GW1 is policy-based, it cannot be converted directly. You must delete GW1 and then create a new route-based gateway for VNet1, after which you can configure P2S connections from on-premises computers. Why the other options are wrong? Option B. Service endpoints are for connecting VNets to pass services, not for enabling P2S VPN. Option C. Resetting GW1 doesn't change its type. It remains policy-based. Option E. You can't correctly add a P2S connection to a policy-based gateway. Option F. Changing the address space is unrelated to enabling P2S. Quick memory tip: P2S VPN only works with a route-based gateway. Question 12. You have an Azure DNS zone named preparationlabs.com. You need to delegate a subdomain named research.preparationlabs.com to a different DNS server in Azure. What should you do? Options: A. Create an NS record named research in the preparationlabs.com zone. B. Create a PTR record named research in the preparationlabs.com zone. C. Modify the SOA record of preparationlabs.com. D. Create an A record named .research in the preparationlabs.com zone. This question is about delegating a subdomain to another DNS server, which always involves NS records at the parent zone. Correct answer: A. Create an NS record named research in the preparationlabs.com zone. To delegate research.preparationlabs.com, you create an NS record named research in the parent zone, preparationlabs.com, that points to the DNS servers responsible for the subdomain. This tells clients to query those servers for any names under research.preparationlabs.com. Why the other options are wrong? Option B. PTR is for reverse DNS lookups, not delegation. Option C. SOA defines information about the zone, not subdomain delegation. Option D. An A record maps a name to an IP. It does not delegate DNS authority. Quick memory tip: subdomain delegation was NS record in the parent zone. Question 13. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 that contains a virtual machine named VM1. You create an Azure Key Vault named Key Vault 1. You need to use Key Vault 1 to enable Azure Disk Encryption on VM1. The solution must support backing up VM1 by using Azure Backup. Which Key Vault settings should you configure? Options: A. Access policies. B. Secrets. C. Keys. D. Locks. This question is about which Key Vault setting must be configured so that Azure Disk Encryption and Azure Backup can use the keys/secrets stored in Key Vault 1. Correct answer: A. Access policies. For Azure Disk Encryption and Azure Backup to work with Key Vault 1, the Azure platform needs permission to access the encryption keys or secrets. You configure access policies, or RBAC, to allow disk encryption and backup services to read or use those values. Why the other options are wrong? Option B, C. Having secrets keys stored is not enough by itself. Access must be granted via policies. Option D. Locks only prevent deletion changes to the vault. They don't grant access for encryption or backup. Quick memory tip. Key vault for disk encryption backup. Configure the access policies. Question 14. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network named VNet1. VNet1 contains 4 subnets named Gateway, Perimeter, NVA, and Production. The NVA subnet contains 2 network virtual appliances, NVAs, that will perform network traffic inspection between the Perimeter subnet and the Production subnet. You need to implement an Azure load balancer for the NVAs. The solution must meet the following requirements. The NVAs must run in an active-active configuration that uses automatic failover. The NVA must load balance traffic to 2 services on the Production subnet. The services have different IP addresses. Which 3 actions should you perform? Options: A. Deploy a basic load balancer. B. Deploy a standard load balancer. C. Add 2 load balancing rules that have HA ports and floating IP enabled. D. Add 2 load balancing rules that have HA ports enabled and floating IP disabled. E. Add a front-end IP configuration, a back-end pool, and a health probe. F. Add a front-end IP configuration, 2 back-end pools, and a health probe. This question is asking how to design a load balancer for active-active NVAs using HA ports and sending traffic to 2 different services, 2 IPs, in the Production subnet. Correct answer. B. Deploy a standard load balancer. C. Add 2 load balancing rules that have HA ports and floating IP enabled. F. Add a front-end IP configuration, 2 back-end pools, and a health probe. A standard load balancer supports HA ports, multiple front-ends, and advanced scenarios required for NVAs. Enabling HA ports and floating IP allows the load balancer to handle all ports and support seamless failover in an active-active NVA setup. Using a front-end IP, 2 back-end pools for the 2 different services/IPs, and a health probe ensures traffic is load balanced correctly and automatically fails over if one NVA is unhealthy. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. Basic load balancer does not support HA ports or all the necessary features. Option D. Disabling floating IP prevents smooth active-active failover behavior. Option E. Only one back-end pool cannot handle 2 separate services with different IP addresses. Quick memory tip. Active-active NVAs, standard LB plus HA ports plus floating IP plus health probe plus correct back-end pools. Question 15. Your on-premise network consists of 2 servers named Server 1 and Server 2, both running Windows Server 2019 Datacenter. On Server 1, a file exists named file1.txt. On Server 2, a file exists also named file1.txt, but its contents are different. You set up a file sync service in Azure to sync the folders that contain both versions of file1.txt to a cloud endpoint. First, you set up Server 1 as a server endpoint. Then a few hours later, Server 2. What will happen to file1.txt? Options. A. File1.txt on Server 1 will be moved to another folder. B. File1.txt from Server 1 is renamed file1server1.txt. C. File1.txt will be overwritten as soon as Server 2 server endpoint is added. D. File1.txt on Server 1 will be renamed file1old.txt. This question is about how Azure File Sync handles a file conflict when 2 servers have different files with the same name. Correct answer. B. File1.txt from Server 1 is renamed file1server1.txt. When Azure File Sync detects 2 different versions of a file with the same name, it treats it as a conflict and keeps both copies. To avoid data loss, it renames one version using a pattern that includes the server name. For example, file1server1.txt, so both versions stay accessible. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. Files are not moved into another folder. They are renamed. Option C. Azure File Sync does not silently overwrite one version when there is a conflict. Option D. The rename pattern uses the server name, not -old. Quick memory tip. File conflict with File Sync, Azure keeps both by renaming one with the server name. Question 16. You have 2 Azure virtual networks named VNet1 and VNet2. VNet1 contains an Azure virtual machine named VM1. VNet2 contains an Azure virtual machine named VM2. VM1 hosts a front-end application that connects to VM2 to retrieve data. Users report that the front-end application is slower than usual. You need to view the average round-trip time, RTT, of the packets from VM1 to VM2. Which Azure Network Watcher feature should you use? Options: A. IP Flow Verify. B. Connection Troubleshoot. C. Connection Monitor. D. NSG Flow Logs. This question wants you to pick the feature that gives ongoing RTT latency measurements over time, not just a quick one-time test. Correct answer: C. Connection Monitor. Connection Monitor continuously tracks connectivity between endpoints like VM1 and VM2 and reports RTT, reachability, and latency trends. This lets you see whether network latency has increased and how it changes over time, which is what you need to troubleshoot the slowdown. Why the other options are wrong. Option A: IP Flow Verify checks allow deny by NSG, not latency. Option B: Connection Troubleshoot gives a single point-in-time result, not long-term average RTT. Option D: NSG flow logs show flows, who talked to whom, not detailed latency metrics. Quick memory tip: need latency over time between VMs? Use Connection Monitor. Question 17. You deploy an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that is configured to analyze network traffic. You need to ensure that all network traffic is routed through VM1. What should you configure? Options: A. A system route. B. A network security group NSG. C. A user-defined route. This question is testing how to force traffic through a specific VM NVA by adjusting routing, not by just allowing denying traffic. Correct answer: C. A user-defined route. A user-defined route UDR lets you override the default system routing and specify a custom next hop, like VM1, for particular traffic. By associating a route table containing that UDR with the subnet, all relevant traffic will be sent through VM1 for analysis. Why the other options are wrong. Option A: System routes are created by Azure and cannot be defined by you to force traffic through VM1. Option B: NSGs control which traffic is allowed or denied, but they do not change the path that traffic takes. Quick memory tip: to send traffic via a specific VM, configure a user-defined route with that VM as next hop. Question 18. You plan to deploy 5 virtual machines to a virtual network subnet. Each virtual machine will have a public IP address and a private IP address. Each virtual machine requires the same inbound and outbound security rules. What is the minimum number of network interfaces and network security groups that you require? Options: A. Network interfaces, 5. B. Network interfaces, 10. C. Network interfaces, 15. D. Network security groups, 1. E. Network security groups, 5F. Network security groups, 10. This question is asking you to reason about the minimum required NICs per VM and how you can reuse one NSG when all VMs share the same rules. Correct answer: A. Network interfaces, 5. D. Network security groups, 1. Each VM requires at least one NIC, and a single NIC can support both a private and a public IP, so 5 VMs mean 5 NICs. Since all 5 VMs need the same security rules, you can define those rules once in a single NSG and apply it to the subnet or all NICs, so one NSG is enough. Why the other options are wrong. More NICs, 10 or 15, are unnecessary. You do not need multiple NICs just to have public and private IPs. Multiple NSGs, 5 or 10, would duplicate the same rules and increase management overhead for no benefit. Quick memory tip: one VM, one NIC. Many VMs, one shared NSG if rules are the same. Question 19. You have an Azure subscription. You need to transfer 34 TB of data from an on-premise Windows Server 2016 server to your Azure storage account. You need to ensure that the data transfer has zero impact on the network, preserves your existing drives, and is the fastest and most secure method. What should be your first step? Options: A. Start an import job via the Azure portal. B. Order an Azure data box via the Azure portal. C. Open a ticket with Microsoft support. D. Prepare your hard drives using the WayImport Export tool. This question is about choosing the right offline bulk data transfer method for large data, tens of TB, with no network impact. Correct answer: B. Order an Azure data box via the Azure portal. Azure Data Box is a secure, Microsoft-provided appliance designed to move large data volumes, TBs, to Azure without using your WAN bandwidth. You order it, copy data locally, ship it back, and Azure ingests the data into your storage account, making it fast and network friendly. Why the other options are wrong. Option AD, classical import-export with your own disks, is more manual and less ideal for 34 TB when a data box is available. Option C, you don't need to open a support ticket for this scenario. The service can be ordered directly. Quick memory tip. Very large data plus no WAN impact, Azure Data Box. Question 20. You need to deploy two Azure virtual machines named VM1 and VM2 based on Windows Server 2016. The deployment must meet the following requirements. Provide a service level agreement, SLA, of 99.95% availability. Use managed disks. You propose a solution to create a traffic manager for the requirement. Would the solution meet the goal? Options. A, yes. B, no. This question is asking what actually gives you the 99.95% VM SLA. Is it just using Traffic Manager or something else in the VM deployment? Correct answer, B, no. The 99.95% availability SLA for VMs is achieved by running two or more VMs in either an availability set with managed disks or across availability zones, not by simply using Traffic Manager. Traffic Manager is a DNS-based traffic routing service and does not itself guarantee the VM compute SLA. Why the other options are wrong. Option A assumes that Traffic Manager alone provides the high VM availability SLA, which is incorrect. It must be combined with proper VM deployment patterns. Quick memory tip. VM SLA 99.95%, availability set, zone plus managed disks, not Traffic Manager alone. Subscribe now because the harder scenario questions are coming next. Question 21. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. You create an Azure storage account named Storage Account 1, and then you create a file share named Data. Which UNC path should you include in a script that references files from the data file share? Options. A. StorageAccount1.core.windows.net data. B. StorageAccount1.blob.core.windows.net data. C. Subscription1.file.windows.net storage account 1 data. D. Subscription1.blob.windows.net storage account 1 data. This question is checking whether you remember the exact UNC format used by Azure files. The core idea is that a file share uses the storage account name plus file.corewindows.net plus share name, not the subscription name or the blob endpoint. Correct answer, A. StorageAccount1.file.core.windows.net data. Azure file shares are accessed over SMB using the UNC pattern. Storage account name, file.core.windows.net file share name. Here, the storage account is storage account 1, and the share is data. So storageaccount1.file.core.windows.net data exactly matches the documented format for Azure Files UNC paths. Why the other options are wrong. Option B uses blob.core.windows.net, which is the endpoint for blob storage, not for SMB file shares. Option C starts with subscription1.file.corewindows.net, but the UNC must start with the storage account name, not the subscription name. Option D uses both the wrong account identifier, subscription1, and the wrong endpoint, blob.core.windows.net, so it cannot be a valid Azure Files UNC path. Quick memory tip. Azure Files UNC equals storageaccount.filecore.windows.net share name. Always file.windows.net, never blob.core.windows.net. Question 22. You have an Azure web app named Web App 1. You have a virtual network named VNet1 and an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that hosts a MySQL database. VM1 connects to VNet1. You need to ensure that Web App 1 can access the data hosted on VM1. What should you do? Options. A. Deploy an internal load balancer. B. Peer VNet1 to another virtual network. C. Connect Web App 1 to VNet1. D. Deploy an Azure Application Gateway. This question is about how a web app can privately reach a database VM inside a virtual network. You need the feature that lets the web app use the VNet's private IP space. Correct answer, C. Connect Web App 1 to VNet1. Using VNet integration lets Web App 1 send traffic into VNet1, so it can reach VM1 over its private IP where MySQL is running. This is the standard way to connect an app service app to resources inside of VNet. Why the other options are wrong. Option A. An internal load balancer only distributes traffic among VMs already in the VNet. It does not connect the web app to the VNet. Option B. Peering VNet 1 to another VNet doesn't help if Web App at 1 itself is not integrated with any VNet. Option D. Azure Application Gateway is a web traffic load balancer HTTP/HTTPS. It is not required for private app to database connectivity. Quick memory tip: web app resource in VNet? Think VNet integration, not load balancers or gateways. Question 23. You have a public load balancer that balances ports 80 and 443 across 3 virtual machines. You need to direct all the remote desktop protocol RDP connections to VM3 only. What should you configure? Options: A. A new public load balancer for VM3. B. An inbound NAT rule. C. A front-end IP configuration. This question is about sending RDP traffic for a single VM when VMs are already behind a public load balancer. You need a way to forward a specific port on the load balancer to just one backend VM. Correct answer: B. An inbound NAT rule. Inbound NAT rules map a front-end port on the load balancer to a specific backend VM and port, so RDP can be targeted at VM3 only. HTTP/HTTPS traffic on ports 80 and 443 can still be load balanced while RDP is forwarded directly to VM3. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. A new public load balancer is unnecessary. The existing load balancer can handle both load balancing and NAT. Option C. A front-end IP configuration only defines the IP address used by the load balancer. It does not specify which VM receives RDP. Option D. A load balancing rule would distribute RDP connections across multiple VMs, which is not what is required. Quick memory tip: single VM RDP SSH via load balancer. Use inbound NAT rules, not load balancing rules. Question 24. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1 that contains the resources shown in the following table. In Storage 1, you create a blob container named Blob1 and a file share named Share1. Which resources can be backed up to Vault 1? In Storage 1, you create a blob container named Blob1 and a file share named Share1. Which resources can be backed up to Vault 1? Options: A. VM1 only. B. VM1 and Share1 only. C. VM1 and SQL1 only. D. VM1, Storage 1 and SQL1 only. E. VM1, Blob1, Share1 and SQL1. This question is about which listed resources can be protected by a recovery services vault. You must know which services actually use this vault type for backup. Correct answer: A. VM1 only. Recovery services vaults support backup of Azure virtual machines such as VM1. Azure SQL databases have their own built-in backup mechanism, and blob containers are not backed up directly to a recovery services vault. Why the other options are wrong? Option B. Azure Files Share1 can be backed up, but it needs explicit configuration. The question only guarantees backup for VM1. Option C. SQL1, Azure SQL, is not backed up via Recovery Services Vault. It uses automatic platform backups. Option D. The storage account object, Storage1, cannot be backed up as a single item in Vault 1. Option E. Blob1 and SQL1 are not covered by Vault 1 in this way, and Share1 is not clearly configured for backup. Quick memory tip: think Vault VM backup first. Storage accounts and Azure SQL use different mechanisms. Question 25. You plan to assign the following Azure policy definition as shown in the following exhibits. What is the effect of the policy? Options: A. You are prevented from creating Azure SQL servers anywhere in XAAS subscription. B. You can create Azure SQL servers in RG01 resource group only. C. You are prevented from creating Azure SQL servers in RG01 resource group only. D. You can create Azure SQL servers in any resource group within XAAS subscription. This question is about how a not allowed resource types policy behaves when it is applied at subscription scope with an exclusion. You need to decide where Azure SQL servers are allowed or blocked. Correct answer: B. You can create Azure SQL servers in RG01 resource group only. The policy blocks creation of microsoft.support/servers across the entire XAAS subscription because of the subscription level assignment. Since RG01 is excluded, the policy does not apply there, so Azure SQL servers can only be created in RG01. Why the other options are wrong? Option A ignores the exclusion. This would only be true if there were no excluded resource group. Option C reverses the logic. RG01 is the only allowed place, not the place where creation is prevented. Option D suggests no restriction at all, which contradicts the not allowed resource types rule. Quick memory tip policy at subscription plus exclusion equals blocked everywhere except the excluded RG. Question 26. You work as an Azure administrator for a company. You have to ensure that a role can be in place that would have the following requirements. View all the resources in the Azure subscription, issue support requests to Microsoft. Use the principle of least privilege. You have to complete the below JSON role definition. Which of the following would go into slot 2? This question is about creating a custom RBAC role that is read only, but can also open support tickets. You must choose the correct action string that enables support operations. Correct answer, C, Microsoft.support. The correct action pattern for allowing support request creation in a custom role is based on Microsoft.support, typically Microsoft.support in real JSON. Combined with read actions, this respects the principle of least privilege while allowing ticket creation. Why the other options are wrong? Option B, not the exact variant the question expects as the valid slot 2 choice. Option D, also not the specific option flagged as correct in this context. Quick memory tip, reader plus open support tickets include Microsoft.support in the allowed actions. Question 27. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. You have 5 TB of data that you need to transfer to Subscription 1. You plan to use an Azure import-export job. What can you use as the destination of the imported data? Options: A, a virtual machine, B, an Azure Cosmos DB database, C, Azure File Storage, D, the Azure File Sync Storage Sync service. This question is about which services can be a landing target for data imported using Azure import-export. You must know which storage types are supported. Correct answer, C, Azure File Storage. Azure Import-Export supports importing data into Azure Files, Azure File Storage, and Azure Blob Storage by copying from shipped encrypted disks. Therefore, Azure File Storage is a valid destination for the 5 TB of data. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, a virtual machine is not a supported import-export destination. The data must land in storage first. Option B, Azure Cosmos DB is not directly supported as a target for import-export. It uses other migration tools. Option D, Azure File Sync is a synchronization service layered on top of Azure Files. It is not a storage destination itself. Quick memory tip, import-export only Blob and Azure Files, not VMs or databases. Question 28. You have an Azure subscription. You create the Azure storage account shown in the following exhibit. The minimum number of copies of the data that storage account will contain? Options: A, B, 2, C3, D4. This question is about how many copies of your data are stored when you use locally redundant storage, LRS. You must recall the replication behavior of LRS. Correct answer, C. With LRS, Azure keeps 3 synchronous copies of your data within a single data center. So the minimum number of copies for the storage account is 3. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, 1 copy would give no redundancy and is not how Azure storage redundancy works. Option B, 2 copies is not the LRS behavior. LRS is specifically 3 replicas. Option D, 4 copies would align more with certain geo-redundant strategies, not standard LRS. Quick memory tip, LRS equals local 3-copy redundancy. Remember the number 3. Question 29. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. You have 5 TB of data that you need to transfer to Subscription 1. You plan to use an Azure import-export job. What can you use as the destination of the imported data? Options: A, an Azure Cosmos DB database, B, Azure Blob Storage, C, Azure Data Lake Store, D, the Azure File Sync Storage Sync service. This question again focuses on Azure import-export, now checking your knowledge of blob storage as a valid destination. You need to pick the supported landing zone for large offline data imports. Correct answer, B, Azure Blob Storage. Azure Import Export can copy data from shipped disks directly into Azure Blob storage containers. Blob storage is one of the main supported destinations for large, offline migrations. Why the other options are wrong. Option A. Cosmos DB is not a direct target for import-export jobs. It uses different migration tools. Option C. Azure Data Lake Store cannot be targeted directly. The common approach is import to Blob, move to Data Lake. Option D. Azure FileSync is an orchestration sync service for Azure Files, not a storage endpoint for import-export. Quick memory tip, import-export, disks, blob, or files. Here the correct choice is blob storage. Question 30. You have an Azure subscription. You create the Azure storage account shown in the following exhibit. To reduce the cost of infrequently accessed data in the storage account, you must modify which setting? Options: A. Access tier, B. Performance, C. Account kind, D. Replication. This question is about reducing cost for infrequently accessed data by changing the correct setting on the storage account. You need to identify the knob that controls hot, cool, and archive behavior. Correct answer: Access tier. Azure Blob Storage provides hot, cool, and archive access tiers, and moving infrequently accessed data to cool or archive reduces cost. The access tier setting is specifically designed to control pricing based on access frequency. Why the other options are wrong. Option B, performance, standard versus premium, relates to latency and throughput, not hot, cool, archive cost tiers. Option C, account kind affects capabilities and features, but it is not the main lever for per blob access frequency pricing. Option D, replication, LRS/ZRS, etc., affects durability and region redundancy, not whether data is treated as hot or cold. Quick memory tip, cheaper cold data? Change the access tier to cool or archive. Question 31. Your company has an Azure account and a subscription. The subscription contains virtual networks with specific address spaces and subnets. The question asks whether a particular configuration or connectivity scenario is possible. The subscription also contains the virtual machines in the following table. The firewalls on all the virtual machines are configured to allow all ICMP traffic. You add the peerings in the following table. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true. VM2 can ping VM1. Options: A, yes, B, no. This question is checking if VNet peering will allow ICMP ping traffic between VNets that have overlapping address spaces. You are really deciding whether Azure will even allow useful connectivity when IP ranges overlap. Correct answer: B, no. Azure does not support VNet peering between VNets with overlapping IP address spaces because routing would be ambiguous. If address ranges overlap, even if you configure peering, traffic such as pings between the VNets will not work as expected. Why the other option is wrong. Option A assumes that peering will work even when the VNets have overlapping IP ranges, which breaks Azure networking rules and would make routing unpredictable. Quick memory tip: if VNet IP ranges overlap, think no valid peering, no cross VNet ping. Question 32. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains a resource group named RG1. RG1 contains resources that were deployed by using templates. You need to view the date and time when the resources were created in RG1. Solution: from the Subscriptions blade, you select the subscription and then click Resource Providers. Does this meet the goal? Options: A, yes, B, no. This question is about where in the portal you can see deployment history and creation timestamps for resources in a resource group. You must recognize which blade actually shows deployment history. Correct answer: B, no. To see when resources were created by templates in RG1, you should go to the RG1 Deployments blade, which shows deployment history and timestamps. The Resource Providers blade at subscription level only manages provider registrations. It does not show individual resource deployment times. Why the other option is wrong. Option A, saying yes, would incorrectly claim that the resource provider's view shows deployment timestamps, which it does not. Quick memory tip: to see when resources were created, go to Resource Group, Deployments, not subscription level resource providers. Question 33. You have an on-premises server that contains a folder named D, important data. You need to copy the contents of D important data to the public container in an Azure storage account named AZ-104 data. Which command should you run? This question is about using AzCopy to upload a whole folder to a blob container in Azure storage. You must choose the correct AzCopy subcommand and parameters for a directory upload. Correct answer, C. The AzCopy copy command is used to copy data from a local folder to a blob container, and Recursive ensures all subfolders and files inside DData are included. The destination URL https://az104day.blob.core.windows.net public points to the public container in the AZ-104 data storage account, which matches the requirement. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, just a URL, not a command. It does not perform any copy operation. Option B, AzCopy sync is for synchronizing source and destination. Snapshot is not appropriate for a simple one-time upload of folder contents. Option D, AZ storage blob copy start batch is an Azure CLI storage command typically used for server-side copy operations between storage accounts, not simple local to blob uploads. Quick memory tip, local folder blob container, use AzCopy copy folder, container URL, recursive. Question 34. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains a resource group named RG1. RG1 contains resources that were deployed by using templates. You need to view the date and time when the resources were created in RG1. Solution. From the Subscriptions blade, you select the subscription and then click Programmatic Deployment. Does this meet the goal? Options. A, yes. B, no. Again, the question is about finding creation timestamps for resources deployed via templates in a resource group. You must decide if the programmatic deployment area is the right place to look. Correct answer, no. To view when resources were created in RG1, you should use RG1 deployments, which shows each template deployment and its time. The programmatic deployment or similar subscription level area does not show per resource creation times in RG1. Why the other option is wrong? Option A incorrectly claims that programmatic deployment provides per resource creation timestamps, which it does not. Quick memory tip. For when was this created? Always think resource group deployments, not subscription level blades. Question 35. You have an application deployed in Azure. This application is hosted on a virtual machine called Demo VM. The virtual machine was deployed using a resource manager template called demo.json. The question asks whether you can use demo.json again to redeploy or manage this VM. Options. A, yes. B, no. This question is about what Azure Resource Manager AG templates are for and whether they can be reused to redeploy or manage existing resources. You must understand the declarative nature of ARM templates. Correct answer, yes. ARM templates are declarative JSON files that define infrastructure. If Demo VM was deployed from demo.json, that template can be reused to redeploy, update, or recreate the VM configuration in a consistent way. This repeatability and automation is one of the main benefits of ARM templates. Why the other option is wrong? Option B suggests the template cannot be reused to manage the VM, which contradicts how ARM templates are designed to work in Azure. Quick memory tip. ARM template equals blueprint. You can reapply the same blueprint to deploy or update resources. Complete notes and practice sets are available on Tech Cloud Solution if you want deeper preparation. Question 36. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains a resource group named RG1. RG1 contains resources that were deployed by using templates. You need to view the date and time when the resources were created in RG1. Solution. From the RG1 blade, you click Automation Script. Does this meet the goal? Options. A, yes. B, no. Again, this is about finding deployment timestamps for resources in a resource group. You must distinguish between automation script and deployments. Correct answer, no. The automation script blade generates an ARM template representation of the current resource group, but it does not show when each resource was created. To see creation time from template deployments, you need RG1 deployments, which lists deployments with timestamps. Why the other option is wrong? Option A would incorrectly treat the automation script view as a deployment history view, which it is not. Quick memory tip: automation script equals export template now. Deployments equals history plus timestamps. Question 37. You have an on-premises file server named Server 1 that runs Windows Server 2016. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure file share. You deploy an Azure File Sync Storage sync service, and you create a sync group. You need to synchronize files from Server 1 to Azure. Which three actions should you perform in sequence? Options: A. Create an Azure on-premises data gateway. Install the DFS replication server role on Server 1. Create a recovery services vault. Install the Azure File Sync agent on Server 1. B. Install the Azure File Sync agent on Server 1. Register Server 1. Add a server endpoint. C. Create an Azure on-premises data gateway. Register Server 1. Add a server endpoint. This question is asking for the correct sequence of steps to connect an on-prem file server to Azure File Sync. You must know the required components for Azure File Sync. Correct answer: B. Install the Azure File Sync agent on Server 1. Register Server 1. Add a server endpoint. To use Azure File Sync, you first install the Azure File Sync agent on Server 1 so it can talk to the Storage Sync service. Then you register Server 1 with the Storage Sync service. And finally, you add a server endpoint that maps a local folder on Server 1 to the Azure file share, enabling sync. Why the other options are wrong? Option A uses an on-premises data gateway, DFS replication, and a recovery services vault, none of which are required for Azure File Sync. These are for different services: Power BI, Logic Apps, on-prem replication, and backup. Option C includes an on-premises data gateway, which is unrelated to Azure File Sync. Even though Register Server 1 and Add a Server Endpoint are correct, the extra wrong step makes the sequence invalid. Quick memory tip: Azure File Sync sequence equals agent, register server, add server endpoint. Question 38. You are using an Azure subscription with data deployed in the following Azure services: DB1 in Azure SQL Database, Container 1 in Blob Storage, Share 1 in Azure Files, Table 1 in Table Storage. You plan to export data by using an Azure import-export job named Data Export. Which data can be exported by using Data Export? Options: A. DB1, B. Container 1, C. Share 1, D. Table 1. This question is about what types of data Azure Import-Export can export from Azure to shipped drives. You must know which storage services are supported. Correct answer: B. Container 1, Azure Import-Export supports data import and export for Azure Blob storage containers. So Container 1, a Blob container, can be exported by Data Export. The service is designed specifically for large data transfers into and out of Blob storage using physical drives. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, DB1, Azure SQL Database, is not directly supported by import-export. Database exports use backpack files or backup restore processes. Option C, Azure Files Share 1 is not supported for import-export-export jobs in this classic exam scenario. Option D, Azure Table Storage is not supported as a direct import-export source. You use tools like AzCopy or custom code instead. Quick memory tip for import-export: think blob containers first. Other services need different migration methods. Question 39. Your company has an Azure account and subscription. A virtual machine named Demo VM is created as part of the subscription. There is a requirement to protect the virtual machine using Azure Backup. You need to apply a rule that the backups must be created every day at 12 and stored for a minimum of 45 days. Which of the following is used to store the backups? Options: A. Blob container, B. File share, C. Recovery services vault, D. Storage account. This question is about where Azure VM backups are stored when using Azure Backup. You need to know the special resource that manages and stores backup data. Correct answer: C. Recovery Services Vault. VM backups created by Azure Backup are stored in a Recovery Services Vault, which also holds backup metadata and retention settings. The vault is the central place to manage backup schedules, retention 45 days, and restore operations. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. A blob container underlies the vault storage but is not configured directly by you for VM backups. Option B. A file share cannot be used to store Azure VM backups from Azure Backup. Option D. A storage account alone is not sufficient. Azure Backup wraps storage inside a Recovery Services Vault abstraction. Quick memory tip. Azure VM Backup equals always think Recovery Services Vault, not plain storage accounts. Question 40. Your company has an Azure account and subscription. A virtual machine named Demo VM is created as part of the subscription. There is a requirement to protect the virtual machine using Azure Backup. You need to apply a rule that the backups must be created every day at 12 and stored for a minimum of 45 days. Which of the following can be used to configure the backup rule? Options: A. A backup policy. B. A batch job. C. A batch schedule. D. A recovery plan. This question focuses on how you define schedule and retention for Azure VM backups. You must recognize the Azure Backup concept that holds schedule and retention settings. Correct answer A. A backup policy. A backup policy in Azure Backup defines when backups run, e.g. daily at 12, and how long they are retained, e.g. 45 days. You assign the VM to this policy, so the service automatically applies the configured schedule and retention. Tutor update. Azure Backup still uses Recovery Services Vaults and backup policies for VM backup. This terminology remains current. Why the other options are wrong? Option B. A batch job is a general scripting automation concept, not an Azure Backup construct for VM schedules. Option C. A batch schedule is not part of Azure Backup. Scheduling is controlled through backup policies, not Azure Batch. Option D. A recovery plan is used with Azure Site Recovery for orchestrated failover, not for backup scheduling. Quick memory tip. When and how long to back up that lives in the backup policy, applied through a Recovery Services Vault. Question 41. You have created a storage account named TechCert Labs Store. You have created a file share named Demo using the file service. You need to ensure that users can connect to the file share from their home computers. Which of the following ports should be open to ensure the connectivity? Options: A80, B 443, C 445, D 3389. This question is about which TCP port is required to access Azure files over SMB from client machines. You need to recall the well-known SMB port used for file shares. Correct answer, C. 445 Azure Files uses SMB over TCP port 445 for file share access from Windows, Linux, and macOS clients. For home users to connect to techcertlabstore.file.core.windows.net demo, outbound port 445 must be allowed on their network. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, 80. Port 80 is used for HTTP, not SMB file share access. Option B, 443. Port 443 is HTTPS, useful for REST APIs, but not SMB file shares. Option D, 3389. Port 3389 is for Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP, not for accessing file shares. Quick memory tip. SMB equals TCP 445. Remember, 445 for file shares. Question 42. You have an Azure subscription named DevTest Sub that is used by several departments at your company. DevTest Sub contains the resources in the following table. Another administrator deploys a virtual machine named VM01 and an Azure storage account named Storage02 by using a single Azure Resource Manager template. You need to view the template used for the deployment. From which blade can you view the template that was used for the deployment? Options: A. VM01, B. RG1, C. Storage02, D. Container1. This question is about where you find deployment history and templates for resources created by an ARM template. You need to know which blade exposes the deployments list. Correct answer, B, RG1. ARM template deployments are recorded at the resource group level, so you go to RG1 Deployments, select Deployment, template to view the JSON used. From the resource group blade, you can see all deployments that targeted that group, including the one that created VM01 and Storage02. Why the other options are wrong. Option A, VM01. The VM blade shows settings for that VM, but does not expose the full original template for the combined deployment. Option C, Storage-02. Same as the VM. The storage account blade does not show the multi-resource template. Option D, Container 1. A container object inside storage does not hold deployment history or templates. Quick memory tip. To find the ARM template used, go to Resource Group, Deployments, Template. Question 43. A company has created a storage account in their Azure subscription. The name of the storage account is TechCert Lab Store. They have also created a file share named Demo. They need to access the files in the file share via UNC path. You need to fill in the following blocks to ensure the right UNC path is provided. Which of the following needs to go into slot 1? Options: A. Blob, B. blob.core.windows.net, C. portal.azure.com, D. File, E. file.core.windows.net, F. TechCert Lab Store. This question is building the UNC path for an Azure file share step by step. Slot 1 represents the storage account name part of the path. Correct answer, F. TechCert Lab Store. The UNC path format for Azure files is storage account name, file.core.windows.net file share name. So slot 1 must be the storage account name, which is TechCert Lab Store. Why the other options are wrong. Option A, Blob, refers to a service type, not the account name. Option B, blob.core.windows.net, domain for blob storage, not a storage account name. Option C, portal.azure.com, Azure portal URL, unrelated to file share UNC. Option D, file, just the word file, not the account name. Option E, file.core.windows.net, service domain, not the account name. Quick memory tip, UNC pattern, account. File.core.windows.net share, slot 1 is always the account name. Question 44. You have an Azure web app named App01. App01 has the deployment slots shown in the following table. In Web App 01-test, you test several changes to App01. You back up App01. You swap Web App 01 test for Web App 01 prod and discover that App 01 is experiencing performance issues. You need to revert to the previous version of App 01 as quickly as possible. What should you do? Options: A. Redeploy App 01. B. Swap the slots. C. Clone App 01. D. Restore the backup of App 01. This question is about using deployment slots to quickly roll back a bad deployment. You need the fastest way to return to the pre-swap version. Correct answer, B. Swap the slots. When you swap deployment slots, Azure swaps the virtual IPs and content of the source and target slots. To revert, you simply swap back so the previous production code returns to the production slot almost instantly. Why the other options are wrong. Option A. Redeploying might be slower and requires access to the original package or pipeline. Option C. Cloning creates a new app but does not directly restore the previous version in the production slot. Option D. Restoring from backup works, but is slower than a simple slot swap and usually used when slot rollback is not available. Quick memory tip: bad swap? Swap back is the quickest rollback for web apps. Question 45. A company has created a storage account in their Azure subscription. The name of the storage account is TechCert Lab Store. They have also created a file share named Demo. They need to access the files in the file share via a UNC path. You need to fill in the following blocks to ensure the right UNC path is provided. Which of the following needs to go into slot 2? Options: A. Blob, B. blob.core.windows.net, C. portal.azure.com, D. File, E. file.core.windows.net, F. TechCert Lab Store. This continues building the UNC path for an Azure file share. Slot 2 represents the service endpoint part of the path. Correct answer, E. file.core.windows.net. The path format is storage account name. File.core.windows.net file share name. So slot 2 must be the file service domain, which is file.core.windows.net. Why the other options are wrong. Option A, Blob, refers to blob service, not file service. Option B, blobcore.windows.net, domain for blob storage, not Azure files. Option C, portal.azure.com, Azure Portal, unrelated to SMB file path. Option D, file, just the word file, not the full service domain. Option F, TechCert Lab Store, storage account name, which belongs in slot 1. Quick memory tip, Azure Files endpoint always ends with file.core.windows.net. Question 46. You have an Azure storage account named storage-01. You plan to use AzCopy to copy data to storage-01. Which of the following are valid storage services in storage-01 that you can copy data to? Options: A, blob, file, table, and queue. B, blob and file only. C, file and table only. D, file only. E, blob, table, and queue only. This question is about which Azure storage services are supported targets for AzCopy. You need to know where AzCopy can copy data to and from. Correct answer, B, blob and file only. AzCopy is a command line utility designed to copy data to and from Azure Blob Storage and Azure File Storage. It does not support direct copy operations to table or queue storage. Why the other options are wrong. Option A includes table and queue, which AzCopy does not support. Option C includes table, again not supported. Option D, only file. AzCopy also supports blob, so this is incomplete. Option E, table and queue are invalid targets for AzCopy. Quick memory tip, AzCopy loves blob files, but not tables or queues. Question 47. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure storage account named Storage1 and the users shown in the following table. You plan to monitor Storage1 and to configure email notifications for several different signals and recipient combinations. You need to identify the minimum number of alert rules and action groups required for the planned monitoring. How many alert rules and action groups should you identify? Options: Alert Rules 1, Alert Rules 2, Alert Rules 3, Alert Rules 4, Action Groups 1, Action Groups 3. This question is about designing Azure Monitor alerts with different signals and recipient groups. You must minimize the number of alert rules and action groups given 4 scenarios and 3 recipient groupings. Correct answer, Alert Rules 4, Action Groups 3. There are 4 different signals or conditions, e.g. ingress, egress, delete storage account, restore blob ranges. So you need 4 alert rules, 1 per condition. There are 3 distinct user combinations for notifications, so you define 3 action groups, then attach them appropriately to the 4 rules. Why the other options are wrong. Fewer than 4 alert rules would force you to combine different signals under 1 condition, which is not how the exam scenario is structured. Fewer than 3 action groups would prevent you from matching each unique recipient combination without extra noise or missing recipients. Quick memory tip: different condition, different alert rule, different recipient set, different action group. Question 48. Note, this question is part of a series with the same scenario. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that runs Windows Server 2016. You need to create an alert in Azure when more than 2 error events are logged to the system event log on VM1 within an hour. Solution: you create an Azure storage account and configure shared access signatures, SAS. You install the Microsoft monitoring agent on VM1. You create an alert in Azure Monitor and specify the storage account as the source. Does this meet the goal? Options: A, yes. B, no. This question is testing if you know how to correctly stream VM event logs into a source that Azure Monitor can query for log-based alerts. You must check whether using a storage account as the source is valid for this scenario. Correct answer, B, no. For event log-based alerts, you should send logs to a Log Analytics workspace, then create a log alert in Azure Monitor using KQL queries. A plain storage account with SAS is not a supported query source for log-based alerts about system events. Why the other option is wrong. Option A suggests that Azure Monitor can use a storage account directly as a queryable source for system event logs, which it cannot. It needs a Log Analytics workspace. Quick memory tip: VM event log alerts, VM agent, Log Analytics workspace, Azure Monitor alert, not direct to a storage account. Question 49. You have deployed in Azure an application App1 on 2 Azure virtual machines named VM1 and VM2. You plan to implement an Azure availability set for App 1. The solution must ensure that App 1 is available during planned maintenance of the servers hosting VM1 and VM2. What should you include in the availability set? Options: A, 1 update domain, B, 2 fault domains, C, 1 fault domain, D, 2 update domains. This question is about how update domains and fault domains in an availability set protect against different types of downtime. The key phrase is planned maintenance by Microsoft. Correct answer D, 2 update domains. Planned maintenance events are applied per update domain, so with 2 update domains, Azure can reboot one domain at a time while the other remains running. By placing VM1 and VM2 in different update domains, App 1 stays available during planned maintenance on one host group. Why the other options are wrong. Option A, 1 update domain means both VMs could be restarted together during maintenance. Option B, 2 fault domains protect against hardware or rack failures, but the question focuses specifically on planned maintenance behavior. Option C, 1 fault domain gives no hardware redundancy and does not address planned maintenance. Quick memory tip: planned maintenance, update domains, unplanned hardware failures, fault domains. Question 50. Note, this question is part of a series with the same scenario. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that runs Windows Server 2016. You need to create an alert in Azure when more than 2 error events are logged to the system event log on VM1 within an hour. Solution: you create an event subscription on VM1. You create an alert in Azure Monitor and specify VM1 as the source. Does this meet the goal? Options: A, yes, B, no. This question is again about the correct architecture for event log-based alerts on a VM. You must decide whether using an event subscription on the VM is appropriate for Azure Monitor log alerts. Correct answer: B, no. Azure Monitor log alerts for event logs require that events be sent to a log analytics workspace via the Microsoft Monitoring Agent or Azure Monitor Agent. An event subscription, used with services like Event Grid, does not integrate directly with Azure Monitor's log query model for system event counts. Why the other option is wrong. Option A treats an event subscription as if it were enough for Azure Monitor to query system events, which is not the case. You still need a log analytics workspace. Quick memory tip: VM event alerts pattern stays the same. Agent, log analytics, Azure Monitor alert. Event subscriptions are for Event Grid, not log alerts. Question 51. A company has set up an Azure subscription and a tenant. They want to ensure that only virtual machines of a particular SKU size can be launched in their Azure account. They decide to implement Azure locks. Does this fulfill the requirement? Options: A, yes, B, no. This question is about the purpose of Azure locks. You need to see if locks can control which VM SKUs are allowed. Correct answer: B, no. Azure locks, read only, cannot delete, are used to prevent deletion or modification of critical resources. They cannot enforce allowed VM sizes or SKUs. That is done using Azure policy, not locks. Why the other option is wrong. Option A treats locks as a governance allow-deny mechanism for SKUs, which they are not designed for. Quick memory tip: Azure locks equals protect from delete change, policy equals control what you can create. Question 52. You have an Azure subscription that contains resources. You need to configure Azure Backup Reports for Recovery Vault 1. You are configuring the Diagnostics settings for the Azure Backup Reports log. Which log analytics workspaces can you use for the Azure Backup Reports of Recovery Vault 1? Options: A, Law 1, B, Law 2, C, Law 3, D, Law 1, Law 2, and Law 3. This question is about where Azure Backup diagnostic logs can be sent. You need to decide whether only one or multiple workspaces are valid targets. Correct answer: D, Law 1, Law 2, and Law 3. Azure Backup Diagnostic Logs for Recovery Services Vaults can be sent to any compatible log analytics workspace that meets region and subscription constraints. In this scenario, all 3 listed workspaces are eligible, so Law 1, Law 2, and Law 3 can be used. Why the other options are wrong. Option A, B, C. Each picks only a single workspace, ignoring that all three satisfy the requirements and can be used. Quick memory tip. Backup diagnostics can go to any valid workspace, not just one special one. If you're still here, you're already studying better than most candidates. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss our next AZ-104 video. Question 53. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. In Subscription 1, you create an Azure file share named Share 1. You create a shared access signature, SAS, named SAS1, as shown in the exhibit. If on November 2nd, 2020, you run Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer on a computer that has an IP address of 134.92.112.1, and you use SAS1 to connect to the storage account UI. Options. A. Will be prompted for credentials. B. Will have no access. C. Will have read, write, and list access. D. Will have read-only access. This question is about SAS IP address restrictions. You need to see if the client IP falls inside the allowed IP range on the SAS. Correct answer. B. Will have no access. The SAS allowed IP range is 134.92.1.10, 134.92.112.5, while the client IP is 134.92.112.1, which is outside that range. When the client IP is not in the allowed range, SAS authentication fails and the client gets no access. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. Even with credentials, if the SAS is used and IP is blocked, access is denied. Option C, D. These assume successful SAS authorization, but because the IP is outside the allowed range, no permissions are granted at all. Quick memory tip, SAS IP range. If your IP is outside, you get zero access, regardless of SAS permissions. Question 54. You plan to deploy several Azure virtual machines that will run Windows Server 2019 in a virtual machine scale set by using an ARM template. You need to ensure that Nginx is available on all the virtual machines after they are deployed. What should you use? Options. A. The Publish AZ-VMDC Configuration Cmdlet. B. Azure Application Insights. C. Azure Custom Script Extension. D. The new As Configuration Assignment Cmdlet. This question is about post-deployment configuration of VMs. Installing software like Nginx. You must choose the extension that runs scripts on each VM instance. Correct answer. C. Azure Custom Script Extension. The Custom Script Extension downloads and runs scripts on Azure VMs, perfect for installing Nginx after the VM is created. You can add this extension in the ARM template, so every VM in the scale set gets Nginx automatically. Why the other options are wrong? Option A. Publish AZ-VMD's configuration only uploads DSC configuration. It does not itself ensure Nginx installation across the scale set. Option B. Application Insights is for monitoring applications, not installing software. Option D. New As Configuration Assignment relates to maintenance configuration, not directly to running install scripts on each VM. Quick memory tip. Need to run a script on each VM after deployment? Use the Custom Script Extension. Question 55. You have the following peerings configured for VNet 6. Both peerings to VNet 1 and VNet 2 show status disconnected. Hosts on VNet 6 can communicate with hosts on options A. VNet 6 only, B. VNet 6 and VNet 1 only, C. VNet 6, VNet 1, and VNet 2 only, D. All the virtual networks in the subscription. This question is checking understanding of VNet peering status. You must decide what disconnected peering implies for connectivity. Correct answer, A. VNet 6 only. If the peerings to VNet 1 and VNet 2 are disconnected, no peering relationship is active. So traffic from VNet 6 can reach only other resources in VNet 6. There is no cross-VNet connectivity. Why the other options are wrong? Option B, C. Assumes some functional peering, but the status is disconnected, so there is no communication with VNet 1 or VNet 2. Option D. There is no automatic connectivity to all VNets. Each peering must be configured and in a connected state. Quick memory tip. VNet peering disconnected equals treat it like no peering only inside its own VNet. Question 56. You have an Azure subscription that contains 10 virtual machines on a virtual network. You need to create a graph visualization to display the traffic flow between the virtual machines. What should you do from Azure Monitor? Options: A. From Activity Log, use Quick Insights. B. From Metrics, create a chart. C. From Logs, create a new query. D. From Workbooks, create a workbook. This question is about choosing the best visualization tool in Azure Monitor for traffic flow graphs. You need the option that supports rich interactive visuals from multiple data sources. Correct answer: D. From Workbooks, create a workbook. Azure Monitor Workbooks provide a flexible canvas where you can query logs, metrics, and build rich visual reports, including graph-style visualizations of traffic flows. Workbooks are the recommended way to build interactive visual dashboards over Azure Monitor data. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, Activity Log Quick Insights focus on management operations, not detailed VM traffic flow graphs. Option B, Metrics charts are good for numerical trends, but not ideal for graph-style topologies between VMs. Option C, Logs can show data, but workbooks are explicitly designed for the visualization layer. Logs alone lack the interactive dashboard experience. Quick memory tip: for custom dashboards graphs in Azure Monitor, think workbooks. Question 57. Note, same scenario series. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription Dev. Subscription Dev contains a resource group named RG01. RG01 contains resources that were deployed by using templates. You need to view the date and time when the resources were created in RG01. Solution: from the RG01 blade, you click Deployments. Does this meet the goal? Options: A, yes. B, no. This question is again about where to find deployment history and timestamps. You must decide if the deployments blade in the resource group is the right place. Correct answer: A, yes. In the RG01 blade, the deployment section shows each ARM deployment with start-end times and status. Because the resources were created via templates, their creation time can be inferred from this deployment history. Why the other option is wrong? Option B suggests you cannot see creation date time there, which contradicts how the deployment's history works. Quick memory tip: when was this created via template? Resource group, deployments. Question 58. A company is planning on deploying an application to a set of virtual machines in an Azure network. The company needs to have an SLA of 99.99% for the application hosted on the VMs. Which of the following should be implemented to guarantee a 99.99% SLA on the infrastructure level? Options: A, make the virtual machines part of an availability set. B, deploy the virtual machines across availability zones. C, assign a standard public IP address to the virtual machines. D, deploy single virtual machines across multiple regions. This question is testing your knowledge of Azure VM SLAs for different high availability options. Key number: 99.99% infrastructure SLA. Correct, sir. B, deploy the virtual machines across availability zones. Microsoft offers 99.99% SLA for VMs when they are deployed across availability zones in the same region. Availability zones protect against data center level failures, giving the highest SLA for VM uptime. Why the other options are wrong? Option A, availability sets provide only 99.95% SLA, not 99.99%. Option C, a standard public IP does not influence SLA for VM availability. Option D, multiple regions is more about disaster recovery, not the standard infrastructure SLA figure quoted in the exam. Quick memory tip: VMSLA, single VM availability set, 99.9%, zones, 99.99%. Question 59. You have an Azure subscription with VM1. You need to create a daily backup at 11 p.m. and retain copies for 7 days. What two items are required to store the backup and configure the schedule? Options: A, a recovery services vault. B, a batch file. C, a backup policy. D, a cron job. This question is about the components of Azure Backup for VMs, where backups are stored, and how schedule retention is configured. You need both the storage container and the policy. Correct answer: A, a recovery services vault, and C, a backup policy. A recovery services vault is the Azure resource used to store and manage VM backups. A backup policy defines the schedule 11 p.m. daily and retention 7 days and is applied to VM1 through the vault. Why the other options are wrong. Option B. A batch file is just an OS level script. Azure backup schedules are not configured via batch files. Option D. Cron jobs are Linux schedulers and are not used to configure Azure backup. The policy inside the vault handles scheduling. Quick memory tip. VM backup equals vault plus policy, vault stores, policy schedules / retains. Question 60. A company currently has an Azure subscription and a tenant in place. They want to deploy the following infrastructure: an application server on Azure Linux VMs, listening on port 80, user requests, and port 8090, control plane requests, a database server VM in the Same-VNet, a load balancer in front of the application servers. In which of the following settings would you configure the ability of the load balancer to check the health of the application server on port 8090? Options: A. Backend pools, B. Health probes, C. Load balancing rules, D. Inbound NAT rules. This question is about where you configure health checks for Azure Load Balancer. You specifically need to probe port 8090 to decide if instances are healthy. Correct answer, B. Health probes. Health probes in an Azure Load Balancer periodically check a configured port and protocol, like TCP 8090 or HTTP 890, to determine if a backend VM is healthy. The load balancer uses probe results to decide which VMs receive traffic. Why the other options are wrong. Option A. Backend pools only define which VMs are behind the load balancer. They do not define health check settings. Option C. Load balancing rules map front-end to back-end ports, but rely on health probes for health status. Option D. Inbound NAT rules are for forwarding specific ports, like RDP SSH to a single VM, not for health checking. Quick memory tip. LB Health on port X, configure a health probe on that port. Congratulations on completing all 60 AZ-104 questions. Your score now tells you exactly where you stand before the real Microsoft Azure Administrator exam. If you scored 50 or above, you are likely exam ready. Start booking your certification exam. Between 40 and 50, focus on weak areas and retake another practice test. Below 40, do not worry. Review the explanations carefully and practice more labs. Remember, passing AZ-104 is not only about certification. It can help you qualify for Cloud Engineer, DevOps, and Azure Administrator roles worldwide. If this video helped you, like the video, comment your score below. Subscribe for more Azure, AWS, DevOps, and cloud certification content.